Step one, oven set to 325 degrees. It all starts with 6 ounces by weight of garlic flavored croutons. Then we follow that with a ½ teaspoon of 2 peppers, both black and cayenne, right in on top of the croutons. A teaspoon of chili powder and a teaspoon of dried thyme. There, that looks pretty good. 1/2 of an onion, I've just kind of cut this up into quarters and it fell apart the rest of the way, into the processor. 1 carrot, 3 cloves of garlic, and about ½ of a red pepper, just torn into chunks. That looks about right. You can drop everything in at once. The meat is the same breakdown as we used before, 18 ounces of each. That goes on top. Now, I'm gonna put about 1.5 teaspoons of salt right on top of the meat. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this up before we add the final ingredient. So, 1 egg right into the middle. So just toss this. Just kind of pack this straight into the loaf pan. And once it's all in, just kind of push it out so that it fills the corners. Now just turn this out right in the middle of the pan. And it will come out like that. Stick with a low oven and use a probe thermometer. And this is going to go straight into that 325 degree oven. It's a relatively low oven. Now all you have to do is plug in your probe and wait till she chirps. The glaze. All starts with a ½ cup of ketchup. Any brand will do. Now the sugar in the ketchup is going to help to create the hardened surface of the glaze. A tablespoon of cumin, hopefully freshly toasted and ground. You're going to toss in a shot of Worcestershire sauce and a shot of your favorite hot sauce. I give a couple of squeezes of honey. When it sets, this glaze will create a darned tasty crust. Now, give this a rest. After all, it is meat, and it needs a few minutes just to kind of get its juices back together. The custard will start with 1 cup of half and half. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball 2 tablespoons here. 1/4 of a teaspoon. 3 eggs, just large eggs. 1, 2, 3. And just whisk gently to combine. There we go, and just put a plate on top and get this back into the refrigerator. That way, we're all set in the morning. Good morning. Let's make that French toast. Retrieve your custard. Set your oven for 375 degrees. Pour the custard in the pan and drop in the first 2 pieces of bread. There. Now let those soak for 30 seconds on each side. No more, no less. Flip and repeat. Now you watch those, I'm gonna go get the butter. Okay, everybody out of the pool. Now these pieces have taken on board all the liquid that they need. By letting these rest for 2 minutes or so, that liquid will move into the core of the bread. And that is gonna make all the difference later on. Heat your largest non-stick skillet over medium-low heat. Butter. And as soon as it starts to bubble down, go ahead and introduce the toast. As soon as those go in, go ahead and start soaking 2 more. It should only take you 5 to 10 minutes to brown all of your toast pieces on both sides. Move them off to the rack, and then move this whole contraption to the oven. Set to 375 as we said. Give these 5 minutes for the custard to firm up, and in the meantime, get ready to eat. After a night's soak, the acid and sugars in the buttermilk have actually invaded the chicken meat, which is gonna give it a nice tangy flavor. This is a poultry shake, and everybody ought to have one. My shake is 2 tablespoons each, kosher salt and Hungarian paprika, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon cayenne pepper. Not only are you seasoning the meat, but the crust that will soon be forming on top. So, go for the gusto. Now, a quick dredge and all-purpose flour. I can see by the little wisps of smoke starting to form on the surface of the shortening that this is ready to go. Take the faster cooking pieces, the breasts, we're gonna put them skin side down at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, away from the hottest part of the pan. Now the drumsticks take a long time to cook, but they're small, so we'll put them at 7 o'clock and 5 o'clock. That's gonna leave the hottest part right here in the center available for the longest cooking pieces, the thighs. Put them down right in the middle so they're not touching anything. You want to cook this until it's golden brown and delicious on side A, and you see a lot of moisture pushing up on side B. It's going to take about 12 minutes depending on the size of the pieces. 12 minutes is up and all looks well. So roll everything right where it is. Now, since we're about to introduce a whole new cold surface to the oil, we're going to get a little bit of a temperature drop. So before we leave, we're going to turn the heat up again to medium-high, just for a few minutes to help compensate. Well, another 12 minutes of rush by here in TV land, and if we've controlled our fat temperature properly, side B should be just a little bit darker than side A. Most importantly, the inside should be done. Only one way to know for sure. 183, fine. Start by combining 8 ounces of finely chopped 54% bittersweet chocolate with 1.5 ounces by weight of sugar and half a cup each of water and freshly brewed coffee in a medium metal mixing bowl set over a wide saute pan with 1 inch of simmering water. That this is not a double boiler, but a bain-marie or hot water bath. The pan is actually wider than the bowl, and although the bowl is indeed sitting right down in the simmering water, I consider this to be a more reliable method of melting than anything using steam. Now, once you've got a thoroughly melted and fairly homogeneous mixture, move the bowl to an ice bath to cool. Now, since it can move more mass at one time than a spatula and also helps to aerate, I generally switch to a whisk at this point. Now we're looking for 60 degrees as our target, at which point the consistency will resemble heavy cream. This is important as hot cocoa butter will not hold the bubbles to come. Now you're going to need a funnel in order to fill the canister. And you want to be very, very careful to never fill it beyond the maximum fill line, because there has to be some room for the gas to compress. So screw the dispensing head very firmly into place, and now it is time to charge the device. We are using a nitrous oxide canister. It goes into this screw-in housing, and in this particular model you have to remove the nozzle. It's different for different types of devices. Screw on until a small needle punctures the canister, and then you'll hear the gas rush into the creamer. So we reapply the nozzle, and now the important part, vertical shaking, at least 20 shakes. Just pretend it's a martini. And then let the canister sit for 60 seconds so that that nitrous oxide can really soak into the mixture. And now the fun part. Grab yourself a glass, turn the creamer upside down, and push the button. Look at all that dark, foamy goodness. Oh my. Of course, you can garnish if you like with maybe some mint and some fresh berries. Here we go again with another 2 pounds of beef bottom round, trimmed of excess fat and cut into half-inch steaks. After the initial seasoning and dredging and of course needling, we'll go back into flour, knock off the excess, then into 3 whole eggs lightly beaten. Be sure to handle the meat by the corners so you don't get club hand. After the egg, we'll go with another layer of flour. That's going to help to create a nice thick chicken fried steak exterior. After the steaks are done, move them to a wire rack and allow them to sit for at least 10 or 15 minutes before cooking. Place a 10 to 12 inch sloped-sided fry pan over medium-high heat and apply just enough oil or bacon drippings to barely cover the pan in a thin film. Always place the rounded part of the meat towards the rounded part of the pan. Now these are going to cook for about 4 minutes per side. As each batch of your steaks finish up, you want to stash them just on a wire rack set on a sheet pan in a 250-degree oven to keep them nice and cozy. Now we build the gravy. This pan will go back over, let's say, medium heat, And we'll add a little bit more vegetable oil. Not enough to coat, just maybe a tablespoon. 3 tablespoons of flour left over from the dredging process. And whisk. 2 cups of chicken broth. And just whisk until this comes just to a boil, and it will thicken up very nicely indeed. As soon as the stock begins to thicken up, broth rather, and it has, we'll add half a cup of that milk and continue to whisk while adding in about a teaspoon, or we'll say half a teaspoon, of fresh thyme. And continue over medium heat until this coats the back of a spoon. There, we'll check, and it coats the back of a spoon very, very nicely. A good heavy pinch of kosher, and we'll say about 5 good grinds. What the heck, we'll make it 10 good grinds of pepper. That should do the trick. Chewy on the inside, a little crusty on the outside, all smothered in a peppery, creamy gravy. 6 crushed cloves of garlic, poached in 16 ounces of half and half. Let that gurgle 10 minutes, kill the heat, and put on the lid. After a 30-minute soak, drain your spud cubes and move them into a pot of water that's big enough to hold the potatoes submerged with at least, let's say, 1.5 inches of water to spare. Toss in a couple of tablespoons of salt and put them over high heat. Now, as soon as they come to a boil, back the heat down to low. These potatoes have now been simmering for a good half hour, but that's not what matters. This is what matters. Time to drain. Now, we go with the garlic cream. Yum. Just pour it in all at once. And grab your favorite masher, this is mine, and go to work. Looks like we've made potato soup, but indeed we haven't. All we need is a little bit of thyme and 6 ounces of Parmesan cheese, shredded. Mash this right in and just walk away. Give this 5 minutes and everything will be different, I assure you. Now for a basic turkey brine, I like to start with about 1 gallon of vegetable broth. And don't use the low sodium or no sodium kind. A cup of kosher salt. About half a cup of light brown sugar. About 1 tablespoon of whole black peppercorns. Along with about 1/2 tablespoon each of whole allspice berries. And crystallized or candied ginger. As soon as your brine comes to a boil, give it a couple of stirs just to make sure everything's dissolved, and kill the heat. Let it cool down to room temperature, then refrigerate it until it's completely chilled. You can do this like 2-3 days ahead of time. Just make sure you leave the lid on. Early the morning of the big day or late the night before, add your brine to a large, clean bucket, 1 gallon of heavily iced water. So just head first, right in there. I'll let this stay in for 6 to 8 hours. And don't worry, as long as you turn this over once, about halfway through the brining, the meat will be perfectly seasoned. Just a big chunk of rosemary, maybe 2, right into the cavity, along with sage. 1/2 of an onion and a red apple that I've microwaved on high for about 5 minutes in some water. And I'm gonna add to that a cinnamon stick. Don't worry about neatness, it doesn't count on this one. Just get everything in there. How do you really know when your bird is done? The answer lies in our little probed friend. You wanna make sure that the probe goes into the deepest part of the white meat. How do you thoroughly cook dark meat, which we like at about 180 degrees, without overcooking the white meat, which we like to pull at about 161? The answer is the turkey triangle. And the secret is to form fit it before you actually need it. Just rub a little canola oil on the inside so that it doesn't stick. And then just mold it to the breast, kind of like a breastplate in a bad Wagner opera, like that. There. Now the last step before we go into the oven is a quick canola rub down. We have our 500-degree oven, and I like to put my turkeys in legs first. So I'm gonna use the timer function of this bad boy, set for 30 minutes. Time for the turkey triangle. Our pre-tailored turkey triangle goes on, and back in she goes. Oven goes down to 350 degrees. Since the cooking ain't over till the fat thermometer sings, you want to keep this door closed. And we've just crossed the 161 magic line. Exactly what we want. Now the temperature inside the bird will continue to increase for at least a few minutes, so don't cut into this and don't pull out the pop-up thermometer. You just want to let it rest. Cover this with something to keep it cozy. You could use an inverted stainless steel bowl or even a big tin of foil, but I find that the lid from my kettle grill wards off all poachers.
Finally, I am done with that cheese you wanted me to grate.
Great. Great. Never mind.
You must be planning to cook a lot of noodles.
Nope, only half a pound. That's 2 cups dry to you and me. I'm gonna bring this back to a boil. Then we'll turn the heat down to medium and let it cook for 6 minutes. Not a minute more, not a minute less. Carefully drain your pasta. Always away from you, Elton, always away from you. And give it a quick bath in cold water. There. Okay, that'll do it. You can turn it off. That is perfectly what I call super al dente. First step is to melt 3 tablespoons of butter over medium heat. After that, we're going to whisk in exactly the same amount, 3 tablespoons of flour. Go ahead, tap that in there. We've got to let it cook for a little while. In fact, once we've got this smooth, we're going to cook it over low heat until it is the color of, well, about the color of your hair. You are going to add a tablespoon of dry mustard powder. Just dump that right in here. And half a teaspoon of paprika, that's the red stuff there. Perfect, good, good. And about half a cup of chopped onions. And 1 bay leaf. Perfect. We're also gonna add in a teaspoon of kosher salt. There you go. Now kind of shake it to level it off. There you go, dump that in. Perfect. Now, we're gonna bring that together into kind of a paste. There you go. Right down the middle. There, nice and slow. Gonna whisk the entire time. Keep going. Now here's the thing. That flour is not gonna start to thicken this sauce until it almost comes to a boil, right? So, you got some whisking to do.
How's that?
That is perfect. But I tell you what, let's get the bay leaf out.
So what's the egg for?
That's a little bit of a secret ingredient. It's gonna add some richness, some extra creaminess, but we can't add it directly to the sauce because it's hot. It'll turn this into scrambled eggs. So tell you what, take your little spoon there and just put about a tablespoon or 2 of that into here. That'll increase the temperature slowly, which is what we need. There you go. This is called tempering, and you do it with a lot of sauces. Whisk fast. Great. Now the last ingredient is, of course,
the cheese.
The cheese. Now, once we've got all that worked in, all we have to do is fold in our noodles and add to the casserole. Now, last but not least, a layer of Japanese breadcrumbs.
Well, why Japanese?
Well, because they're very, very coarse, and so they're gonna brown up a lot crisper. Hand me that melted butter over there, will you? I got a cup of these and a 1/4 cup of this. There you go. Now the butter is gonna help them to brown. And brown means crisp, and crisp is what a lot of this dish is about. It's about contrast between a crunchy top and a creamy interior. So just gonna smear those on the top. There. Now, half an hour in a 350-degree oven. Mmm. Mmm. Now we begin with a cast iron Dutch oven in the 4 to 5 quart range with just enough peanut oil to come about halfway up the side. We have our heat set to medium high and our thermometer in place so we'll know when we hit the 390 to 400 degree range that we desire. In the meantime, pick out 5 of your finest whole dill pickles and split them into spears, quartering that is, and lay them out on a long piece of paper towel. Then just roll it up. The goal, get off the surface moisture, but don't squeeze. 1 cup of buttermilk and 2 cups of plain old-fashioned cornmeal, which, if you wish, you could season with a tablespoon of salt, or you're welcome to simply season later on. Now, here's how the dipping procedure goes. Pickle into the dip, then into the dredge, then use a fork to kind of toss that around so you don't get club finger, right? Now, this could go directly into the fry oil, but you would be missing an opportunity. So we're gonna return it to the dip, give it another turn, and then back into the dredge one last time. Now, I don't want to do these one at a time or I'll get out of sequence on what's done and what isn't. So I'm going to kind of stack them up 4 to 5 at a time and then fry them in batches. When you're ready to move into the oil, get yourself another fork and kind of make a little stretcher and move over into the oil. There, now when the cold pieces first go in, you may see a little bit of a drop in the oil temperature, but don't try to chase it around the dial. If you boost it up really hot, it's gonna go over 400 and that'll be a bad thing. I would just leave it alone. It'll bounce back soon enough. It's been 2 minutes and these look done. So, transfer to a draining rack and allow them to cool for about 5 minutes before consuming. I know technically this should be a side dish, but with a little horseradish sauce on the side, I think of this as a main course option, and vegetarian to boot. Lay each slab out on its own big piece of heavy-duty aluminum foil, and make sure that the shiny side is down. That'll make the heat come in just a little bit slower, which is good. Now, lay on the rub and don't be prissy about it. Contact is critical. Push on and flip. Now, this other side doesn't matter quite as much, so don't go overboard. It's mostly the convex side that we're after. Why aluminum foil? Well, because we can basically shape the pan to fit the food, which is a good thing. And of course, you don't have to wash it. I love that. So, bring it right up in the middle and just fold it over once and then push down. We don't want to do any fancy crimping because we've got to get back into these to add some liquid later. There. Now, these are going to go right back into the refrigerator for at least 1 hour before cooking. You could do this, well, the night before, and it would be even better. For moisture and acidity, 1 cup of white wine. Bolster that with 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. If you don't have white wine vinegar, it's okay. Just use any vinegar that you've got. 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. That takes care of the salty. Now for the sweet, a tablespoon of honey. And I never measure this stuff. I just figure that each squeeze is a teaspoon. So 3 squeezes, 1, 2, 3. 3 teaspoons makes a tablespoon. Now, really last but not least, 2 smashed and chopped cloves of garlic. There we go. Just scoop that right in. We're gonna put this in the microwave for 1 minute. Meanwhile, we will prep the ribs. Just open up one end of the crimp, kind of turn it into a funnel. Half the liquid goes into this side, and half the liquid goes into this side. And just give the tray a little bit of a tilt, just to kind of distribute everything down there. Then crimp up the ends. Next stop for these bad boys is a 225-degree oven for 2.5 hours. Now, aggressive oven management is required here, so cook by your instruments, namely the oven thermometer. When it comes to ribs, speed kills, so do not attempt to pick up the pace on this. Your patience will be rewarded. Well, the timer says the braise is done, but there's only really one way to know for sure, and that's to look and feel. Just grab one end, lift up, and then reach for one of the, one of the ribs further back. Just grab it and give it a twist. Now, if you feel the bone just rotating in the socket, that means that the collagen has started to dissolve around the bone. That means that these ribs are done. Lay the packet right in the middle of the pan like that, and take your kitchen shears and just snip a hole in the foil. Now, all in all, I'd say that we got about 1.5 cups of liquid back out of this, and those are fine liquid assets indeed. 10 minutes later, and a humble braising liquid is reduced down to a barbecue sauce. Grab your nearest basting brush, this is the only way, and literally paint the glaze right onto the meat. This goes under the broiler, but I'm not about to tell you how long. The reason is, I don't want you to walk away from this, even for a minute, because in as little as 30 seconds, that sugar is going to start to bubble on top that's in the glaze. It's going to start to caramelize. Keep a very close eye on it.